The third aspect of the context that I want to draw your attention to is the social context. The economic crisis was such that it catapulted huge sections of the population in this country and the United States and throughout Western Europe into long-term unemployment. In the 1930s we still have a very minimal state. We'd had the predominance previously of the free market position of a very minimal state, and therefore unemployment protection, the role of the state in welfare provision and so on was very much less than it was in the post-war period, and that indeed is part of the story that I'm hoping to tell you in this lecture. That conditions the discussion and the context in which negotiations over Bretton Woods emerged, importantly because it was seen as absolutely essential in the social democratic world that any post-war compromise would provide protection for the working population, both to keep their job in the first place and also to provide for some guarantee of a minimum standard of living in the event of unemployment. And that was important in several respects. Morally it was seen as important, and also politically important, because a returning army from any war may obviously, without that degree of protection, may have obviously asked questions about the nature of future power. And final aspect of or one implication of that social context, and that's the realization of the social goals of the post-war state, post-war social democratic state, and the post-war compromise internationally, was the need for an enhanced state capacity in order to intervene in the market to achieve that objective. Fourthly then, I want to draw your attention to the ideological context, some of which we've already begun to elaborate. The ideological context, certainly in the social democratic world, saw a shift away from earlier liberal ideas, but certainly didn't question the notion of liberal ideas or indeed the notion of capitalism per se. Further important aspect of the ideological context was an increased and widespread awareness of the importance of international peace, and also the importance of the self-determination of states and the mutual obligation of states to one another. One of the essential aspects of the interwar crisis was the breakdown of trade relations between states and the pursuit of what are often called beggar thy neighbour policies. That is, policies intended to be in the interests of the states pursuing them, but without a consideration of their impacts on other states. One such policy was the British adoption of imperial preference, that is, preferential trade within the British Empire from 1933 onwards, and a policy that the United States in particular was very keen to get rid of in any post-war world. Finally, a part of the ideological context was that there was an increased acceptance of the need for international institutions to in some way govern and regulate the behaviour of states. And that is an important departure from any pre-existing notion of how the international state system operated. Finally, the institutional structure. Some of this, again, we've already touched on, the role of institutions in regulating market behaviour, but I think also important in this context was the openness of institutions themselves to technical experts. You have an example of that in the establishment of what's often called the New Deal Brains Trust in the United States after President Roosevelt came to power, and I think it provides an important explanation for the amount of autonomy, particularly Keynes, and as we shall see, Harry Dexter White, on behalf of the United States, had in negotiating on behalf of those two states. An unusual degree of institutional or openness to individual technical experts.